You're listening to The Photography Pod, a show for both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. And here's your hosts, Steve Vaughan and Nick Church.
Hello again and welcome to The Photography Pod, a photography podcast for both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. My name is Steve Vaughan and once again I'm here with my good mate Nick Church. This show is going to be a little bit different, so we normally start with a little bit of a chat and a bit of background about the week that we've had and what we've been up to, but we've got such a fascinating guest today that we really want to go straight in to finding out a lot more about our guest and about her photography and also about her personal journey. So I'm going to hand over straight away to Nick, who's going to introduce our guest today.
Hello, listeners. Thank you for joining and for downloading this episode of Photography Pod. Today we have Sujata with us today. And Sujata grew up in Jaipur in India and worked in the TV and radio industry in India there before moving to London for her master's in international relations. Now, her photography, as I was talking to Steve beforehand, most photographers mention about award-winning. This is definitely the case with Sujata. So Sujata Setia has won huge acclaim across the world for awards for her work. And her work highlights the issues facing women all over the world and challenges those cultural norms that we assume in terms of photography about what makes a beautiful photo. And it's just absolutely fascinating. And we're really delighted to have her on today. As we approach International Women's Day in March, then there's no better time to have a female photographer with us. And so we're delighted to welcome her. I should add that today's episode will contain issues around child and domestic abuse. So I just wanted to make that clear before we start. Sujata, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. Hi, Nick. Hi, Steve.
Great to have you here, Sujata. Thank you for being with us. Yeah.
So I've given a very quick potted history. I suspect that was possibly not even all correct, but it was probably far too brief. Would you like to give us a bit of a background about your journey into photography?
My God, it's so difficult to talk about yourself, because as artists, our work is constantly evolving. So when somebody asks me to talk about my work, it's I think by far the most challenging thing. So I grew up in India, in Jaipur, which is the north of India. And then I got married, which was the reason why I moved to the UK. And in the first year of having moved to the UK, I did my master's from King's College in international relations. Funnily, couldn't find a job here in the UK for a good 5 years, which sort of threw me in a darker depression than I already was holding within me for a very, very long time. And that's when somehow a camera became my alternative language, a way for me to communicate my inner darkness to the world that I wasn't able to communicate in words. And was also around the time when my daughter was born. So I started by taking photographs of her, and it was a great way for me to build a bond with her, a bond where there was no power tussle between her and me. She and I were at an equal level playing field, so the camera became that sort of a balancer. And that's where my photography journey really started. And
so did you have no background in photography before then, Sujata?
No, none at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to those other projects that I briefly mentioned in the introduction. But you're also well known for your maternity and family and newborn photography. And I sort of say, in quotes, more traditional photography, but it's anything but. It's just really beautiful work. So the listener can see Sujata's work under the brand But Natural Photography. So www.
And we'll link it in the show notes.
butnaturalphotography.com. Yeah, you can find it in the notes. So I just want to briefly touch upon the But Natural Photography work. You have this incredibly warm, but not overly warm, but just a very pleasing, otherworldly almost approach to your work. Is that just something that evolved, or is that an intentional way that you try to create your photography?
I think, Nick, my work is very autobiographical, has always been, and it's always come from a place of me trying to express something, an alternative universe that perhaps is a way for me to erase my own traumatic childhood, or a way to face it head on. Either way, it was autobiographical. So why I worked towards making these very magical, almost fantastical portraits of families was a way for me to tell myself that this is how the perfect world is meant to be, that there is pure and unconditional love, and nothing ever really goes wrong. So you would see a lot of beautiful elderly love portraits. And yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I naturally transitioned into that kind of work. But it was a slow development. I mean, the technique came with time.
So it's almost, and if you're not comfortable speaking about this, then please say. But obviously you had a difficult childhood in India, from what you're saying, and reading your notes on your website, suffered abuse as a child. You're kind of saying it's almost like you're wanting to bring in your work, should I say, a much more pleasant, happier place, a loving place, because you didn't experience that as a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So I'm just sharing some of these images now, so that people that are viewing this podcast rather than just listening to it can see. But if you are listening to it and not viewing it, then if you head to the show notes, then you'll be able to find a page with these photos on. They are just. What's your process around? I mean, what's your kit starting with for these?
When I started off, I think the very first camera, funnily, I mean, I had no idea. I would just go on Facebook, and I would start off by looking at these American photographers who would use large 70 by 200 lenses, and some of them had 200 prime lenses. And I just knew somehow that maybe that's the kit to be using. So I remember telling my husband I need the best camera in the market. That's all that my brief to him was. And then he went and he that's exactly what he told the store owner. Can you give me the best camera? So he got a Nikon D800, which is where I started my professional journey from, and I still hold on to that camera. It's a beautiful camera body.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Nikon D800 and 70-200 f2.8 was my starting kit lens, which is what I used to make outdoor portraits, which was amazing, because for outdoor portraits and the kind of whimsical look that I was going for, shooting wide open is a great idea. So I used to always shoot a 200 focal length and f2.8 aperture wide open. So which is why you would get a great depth of field as well. And indoors, my go-to lens was 50 f1.4 at that time.
Okay. And in terms of your process to create these very smooth, I mean, especially the portrait of this couple here, it is almost otherworldly. Is that if you got a Photoshop heavy post-production workflow?
I'd not call it Photoshop heavy, really, though people would. But you've just got to really get it right in the camera as well. It's very important. I mean, your lighting is very critical. Your styling is extremely important, to know that you're not going to use more than 2 or 3 main colors. So you match your colors according to what background you're seeking. Very, very important. Then you get the light right, wherein there is balanced exposure on the faces of the subjects, not too much brightness, not too much highlights and shadows. So if you've got that even balance on their skin tones, then what else is important? The depth of field, like I said, there has to be a great distance between the subject and the background. Nothing should be blocking the background from the back. So if you're keeping all of these basic checkpoints cleared out, then your straight out of camera is a really good, clean image to work with.
Yeah.
And then the editing is very basic. So I would work with levels, curves, and solid color layers. And I think pretty much that's about it, and it would work for me.
Yeah, no, it looks lovely. And I think that idea of making sure you've got the right contrast in the actual scene, rather than, sort of requiring it to be added in later, is always going to be the best way. And I think that's where we get examples like this. The best portraits come from is having all that stuff in the camera before you even start your post processing.
Absolutely.
So the other, so you've got there's the but natural photography. Then the other half of your photography output is through sujatasetia.com, so www.sujatasetia.com. And this is where we find your more humanitarian work, I guess, if we can call it that. And it's very different. I'm going to share some images shortly. How do you kind of navigate those two, I suppose, brands or styles of output when you've got one very storytelling, very emotive and challenging work compared with just really beautiful family images. Is there overlap in how you approach those two sides, those two types of shoots?
It was when I started to make that transition, to be honest, Nick, it was a very natural sort of transition. It wasn't like I was consciously trying to move away from child and family portraits. So the starting point was to have a solid client base with the commercial child family commissions, and to know that I am in a financial and business space now where I'm able to take that measured risk, where I can make work that is truly for myself.
Sure.
So
that pays the bills effectively.
It is important at the end of the day. I mean, we are artists, yes,
Absolutely.
but we are also people who have to bring bread on the table. So
completely.
You need to straddle those two parts of your professional life in a balanced way. So yes, so then when I started to make that transition, I made it very smoothly in a way that my work was sort of visually not taking away so markedly that my audiences that was already built on my social media platforms would not relate to it. So when I started making the work, for example, the series Changing the Conversation, where I am looking at breaking the binaries of beauty and showcasing how beauty is way more than just pretty or ugly, good or bad, boy or girl, red or pink. So there are lots of things that exist between those two binaries. I started off initially by photographing mothers and children, mothers from different walks of life and their children together. So it was a natural transition from my family portraits, and then slowly, then I moved into photographing people with other visible differences as well, and individuals in that sense. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that way it sort of worked well for me also, because sometimes as artists, when you're so comfortable in your space of creating a certain kind of work and your identity is attached to it, it also becomes difficult for you as an artist to step away from it.
Yeah,
it's scary.
It's something like pushing out your comfort zone a little bit as well into something very different, something very challenging, really. When you approach people for these kind of portraits, what do they think? What do they say when you say you're interested in taking the photos? Are they surprised? Are they pleased?
When I approach them, I am actually most of the times confused myself. I don't know where I'm heading towards, because these personal projects are coming also from a space of confusion, from an internal chaos where I don't know what is it that I'm trying to really say, or what is it that I'm looking for. So I would be very honest with with the participants. I would tell them that I'm looking at creating your portraits. This is my reason. I believe that it is important as a mother of a 10 or an 11-year-old. When that was the time when I started working with this series, that I feel that I need to break down these barriers, and that's the way I can pay back through my art. Would you be happy to collaborate with me? And all I can give you in return is visibility for your own narratives as well through my social media channels. And then many would want to just share their story and not partake. Many would partake, so it be entirely based on consent and respect. And then I think everybody's been very, very happy with their portraits. They feel like there's a lot of dignity, and they are showcased the way they want to be showcased. I mean, there was no again, there was complete consent and participation in each of the portraits.
I think that they're just such powerfully beautiful portraits. I think I'm just blown away by them. I really love them.
Absolutely.
So this is this project was is it challenging the conversation? Changing the conversation. Yeah. My apologies. And so your most recent work, the most recent exhibition is the project was called 1,000 Cuts, which is quite different again. And if I share some of these while I'm sharing these, would you like to just talk a bit, Sujata, about that project?
Yeah, so 1,000 Cuts is a series. It's an interdisciplinary series. It's the very first work that I have made, which is not entirely photography, but something more than that. So I engage another artistic process in it besides photography, which is called the art of paper cutting. And it is a series that tries to look at domestic abuse within the South Asian culture. It is a work that I have made with conversations and participation of individual domestic abuse survivors. So I've spoken with, I think, over 30 to 35 survivors by now, and there are 17 portraits in this work so far, and it's an ongoing series. So in this, for the very first time, I've moved beyond pure photography. I've also involved my own journalistic past in it, so it's very research based. It's very uh, participation based. It's also, again, like I said, I would print the photograph of the survivor and then I would make physical cuts on top of it to show the multi-dimensionality of domestic abuse, how it starts from somebody's past, becomes someone's present, and then goes on to become somebody else's future.
Could you just say a bit about where the 1,000 cuts come from? Because reading on your website, it comes from an ancient form of torture, I believe, for you.
Yes, so there is an ancient South Asian form, an Asian form of torture called death by 1,000 cuts, or Lingchi, in which it's a bit cathartic, but in which the perpetrator would essentially start to make small incisions on the body of the victims, small enough to not kill the victim all at once, but large enough to hurt. And through those incisions on a regular basis, the pain would sort of normalize in the mind of the victim. The victim would slowly stop feeling the pain because it is happening on such a regular basis. So that's exactly the sort of metaphor I wanted to work with, to showcase that domestic abuse is such a cyclical process wherein
Absolutely.
the perpetrator would inflict violence of whatever format on you, apologize, and within seconds that pain would be normalized, and within seconds then it would happen all over again. So yeah, that's the metaphor I wanted to use for this work.
It's a phrase that was used in everyday language. We talk about in business, the death by 1,000 cuts. It's used as a metaphor for, businesses that are declining or whatever. But I never realized actually it comes from a real, form of torture, horrific. And I can absolutely see the analogy with the normalization of domestic abuse, and how that becomes every little incident becomes the new norm almost, really. Yeah. Amazing.
Now your work, this project around child abuse and domestic violence, or domestic violence in this case, that comes from lived experiences for you, and I can't imagine what these experiences must be like, but I also can't bear to even try and think what they might be like. And so how difficult is it for you to immerse yourself in topics like this with that background?
I think, Nick, I've reached a stage in my personal life journey where I feel like it is important for me to face these personal pains. Like I said, I mean, when I was making that whimsical work, I was in a space emotionally where I was just running away from my trauma, and then there came a point where I had no other choice, as a result of my circumstances, but to face it head on. It was following the passing of my mother, and I had to give closure to this. I had to, and the best thing I could really do for myself and the community that we have collectively built around with each other, the survivors and myself, is to be able to find this sort of collective healing where we had the space to just have endless conversations without one person judging the other's narrative, or without one stopping the other from talking any further. There was just this open door policy where you come in, talk. If you want to leave your story behind, leave it. If you want to come back again and be part of the project, do that. It was just such a beautiful space that I felt like I was finally finding healing to something I had been carrying with me for 40 years. So yeah.
Wow. I mean, I could for more than any other project I can think of, that person-centered approach to your work must be in evidence here, that the photography happens presumably quite a way down the process of gaining trust and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So these are remarkable images, really. I think there's no other word for it, really. And the awards that you've won are, absolutely, completely well deserved. Just tell us how you go about. Look, I mean, the image we've got on the screen right now. Tell us how you go about preparing an image like that, and also how long would it take, for that matter?
This work actually really, Steve, came with multiple iterations, because this is the very first time I was faced with the challenge of not being able to showcase the sitter's identity. And as a portrait photographer, I've only worked with people's faces. That's for me the window to showcase somebody's emotions and their narrative. So this was quite a big challenge for me. But though obviously for various reasons, the survivors did not want their faces to be showcased. So when we started working, there were many different iterations I came up with. Finally, together, when we sat down and listened to all the interviews over and over again, the one thing that came through was every survivor said that I feel like I'm completely torn from within. I feel like my soul is so fully injured if you look at me from inside, and that's what we tried to then showcase in the work. And which is the reason why I tried to use the art of paper cutting. Paper cutting is also a very traditional South Asian artistic
Okay.
format, and it was long back. Historically, it was used by in Hinduism. There is a god called Krishna, and Krishna is a very loving god. I'd say he's filled with love, so he has a lot of consorts. He has a wife, but he also has a lot many consorts. So all the consorts would utilize the form of paper cutting to make these beautiful prints, artworks, to impress Krishna. So for me, when I studied that art form, I felt like it had an inherent gender bias in it, where it is showcasing that the role of a woman is to impress the man and the role of the man is to be impressed. I mean, again, it's very subjective. Somebody else would take that paper cutting art form completely differently. For me, this was the interpretation. So that worked really beautifully for me to employ that for this specific story that we were trying to showcase, which is why we utilized it here. And then when I started working on the paper cutting, I would go back to the story of the survivor and look at one of the metaphors that I could pick from it. So, for example, this survivor, we both collectively, through our conversations, when I was listening to her, I told her, you really sound like a butterfly to me whose wings were clipped. And she said, that's exactly who I was and who I am now once I've left his house. So it was almost like a dialogue we were having with each other, where we came up with this. It wasn't her, me imposing that on her or her not giving it to me. It was just a mutual conversation through with this came, and then that's exactly what we put through.
So what is the process then? So are you literally, you have a photograph on top of, I guess, red paper, and you're literally cutting pieces out of the photograph to reveal the red? Is that what you're doing?
So I would photograph the survivor in whatever setting is most comfortable for them. Usually it would be an indoor space. Either they would come over or we would find a common space, whichever is closer for them. And we'd go there. I just put a hand-painted backdrop. I have a foldable, very cheap hand-painted backdrop, which I'd carry with me everywhere. We'd do the photo shoot. Then I'd print it on a A4 size sheet on my home printer, cheap home printer. I'm a poor photographer now. So just would print it, and then I'd just start making cuts on top of it without any sketches or anything. Just a broad idea in my head. I'd start making cuts on top. And then I would place a red paper underneath of it and re-photograph that entire collage, as you could say. And that re-photographed version is what you see here.
Incredible. So you've won lots of awards on the back of this project, and just looking on your website, there's the Sony World Photography Awards. We immediately saw that because we're both Sony photographers. What was the response when you first started showing this kind of work? Because it's so different. Were people surprised? Were people shocked? Or did you find that people immediately, got what you were trying to do?
I can honestly say a lot of visibility has come to this work thanks to Sony World Photography Awards, because until that award came through, I was literally walking with my little A4 size box in which I had all of these artworks, and I was going door to door trying to showcase this work to people, and not because I was seeking any sort of validation or because I wanted visibility for myself as an artist, but I was very, very hungry for our stories to go out. And I felt such an insurmountable burden on my shoulders that I'm carrying these stories of women who have generously given me their time and their lives narratives, and I am nowhere with this. I just have it all put in a box again, and nobody's looking at it, and it was a very difficult time. But Sony World Photography Award suddenly came through, and the life of this project has completely changed after that.
Amazing. Yeah, the responsibility, I can imagine the responsibility of having all of those stories and you wanted to share them, it must have been really stressful to, and to find that the way to communicate those through that award, and what that's ended up, resulting in, it's just fantastic. And is this part of your talk at the photography show? Will you be talking about this area of your work?
Yeah, I will be.
So Sujata's session is on the 8th of March at 10 to 4, so 5:50, and it's the photographer's exploration of purpose. Would you like just to do a bit of introduction around your session, Sujata?
I will be speaking about my journey from child and family portraits, from a very fantastical photography career to something more, I would say, social impact based work, and how to, like I said, straddle two different careers, one which is very commercial, commissions based, and the other which has impact. And how do you promote your work? how do you get new commissions, and how do you balance personal and professional.
Perfect. And your the 1,000 Cuts project was being exhibited it was in Hyderabad in India.
It was in Chennai.
Okay.
Right now, it's being exhibited in Chennai as of now.
Right. Perfect. So, and is there any plans for that to go outside of India for people?
It will be showcased in Photo From in April, at Derby Format Festival in March, and at Photo London in May.
Okay, and your website, the sujatasetia.com, is that the best place for people to find out where they may be able to see this exhibition?
It would be Instagram. That would be the best place. Yeah.
I'm fascinated to know what's next, because you've come from such a personal journey, from the horrific experiences as a child, moving country, obviously going through the depression you mentioned, starting a very successful portrait and childbirth, newborn, that's the right phrase I wanted, newborn photography, and now going into this very personalized, very very sort of individual style of photography. Where do you see yourself going next? What would be the next thing on the horizon for you?
Showcasing social impact, Steve, is where my heart lies. I mean, women narratives that haven't been spoken about for the longest time. Abuse is where my core is going to be. I know I have started to get commission work based on my social impact work already. Like, I've just secured a King's College London grant for working with the women artisanal community in Kashmir. So it's exciting. It's exciting times for me. It's almost like starting all over again. And literally taking those baby steps, but I'm very happy about the fact that the work that I truly want to make is finding its way back to me.
Right.
So yeah, that's where I'm heading towards.
And will the more commercial stuff, will you still do that? Is that still the paying the bills mostly at this stage? Yeah,
I do have a steady stream of clients, so it's a good space.
Great, love it, fantastic. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sujata, for giving up a bit of your day. Now you're off for childcare duties soon, by the sound of it. But thank you very much for joining us. It's been completely fascinating, and as I said, your work is just mind blowing. I really love it. So anyone that's listening, do look at the show notes page. We'll have some images on there and links to all of Sujata's work, and her website and the Instagram feed, so you can see the sort of recent updates and where the exhibitions might be.
And just for the listeners right now who can't wait, just give us the two Instagram channels, if you could. What are they called?
It's Sujata Setia. One is, and the other is But Natural Photography.
Okay, and they're very easy to find. Yeah. Sujata, thank you ever so much for your time today. And I'll be at the photography show. Nick, I know, is talking there as well. So it'll be great to meet you in face-to-face as well.
Absolutely.
And thanks again for your time today.
Can't wait.